Welcome to Season 6 of the Biz and Tech Podcast. My name is Blake Dowling. We are in Tallahassee, Florida on a beautiful day in February, and we'll start today's show with a cyber alert. The city of Jacksonville Beach had some sort of breach recently, and guess what? Hackers are using their email to spew malicious content, bad links, badware, we'll call it, all over the state of Florida. If you see an email from City Hall, Department of Recreation, Emergency Services, anything from Jax Beach, ignore it, delete it, talk to your IT team, email me. I can give you some advice, but don't click, don't enter email. It's not a good situation. They should have things secured up in a week or two, but until then, be careful as hackers never stop. And bad actors are all over the place here in 2024. Today we welcome Mark Mustian to the show. We're going to talk about the festival he created, Word of South. We'll talk about his career as a lawyer, as well as a past career as an elected official. Welcome to the Biz and Tech Podcast, sir. How's your day going?
Good. How are you, Blake?
Awesome. Another day in paradise.
That's right.
Well, let's get started. You and I sat down 2 years ago. We talked about Word of South. You threw it out there. This is what's going on. I was familiar with the festival. It's a literary festival. It's a music festival. And we got involved. We saw Ben Folds of Ben Folds 5. Great performance with our symphony. Took the whole company out. We had a ball, and we look forward to doing it again with the Flaming Lips. So how does one, as an attorney, as an author, as an elected official, how do you pivot, to use a pandemic word? How do you pivot into a festival organizer, creator? Because it's awesome. It's something unique, and it's got a great reputation, and you're going on, 10 years now?
Yeah, this will be year 10. So, yeah, it's just sort of a long and strange journey to get here.
All the good ones are, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have had a couple of novels published, and with the last one, I got invited to speak at these literary festivals around the country. I went to the LA Times Book Festival, the South Carolina Book Festival, and I'd never been to one. And I'm thinking, man, this is great. You know, it's free, all these books, all these people that like books. And so I was on the city commission then, and I said, well, we need to do something like this in Tallahassee. But I figured I'd better wait till I got off the commission because this was going to be a heavy lift. And then, when I got off and we decided to still do it, we talked about, well, rather than just being the Tallahassee version of the South Carolina Literary Festival, why don't we try and do something different? And we talked about, you could combine books and politics, you could combine books and art, you could combine books and the environment, but sort of the easiest thing to do is, let's combine books and music and let's give it a go. And so we sort of blindly stumbled into it. And one of the fascinating things is there's really nothing like this. If you Google book and music festival, you don't find much. Somebody told me there's something in England that's sort of like this, but not really. And so we've been fortunate to sort of have a little niche that nobody else has to this point, and do something pretty special for Tallahassee. So we've been, we try and it's sort of, you've heard the phrase, keep Austin weird. We try and keep Word of South a little bit weird, okay?
Right.
There's just different stuff. I mean, stuff that you can see here every day. We're less interested in doing that. We want to bring in people and do different things. And part of what I'm proudest of is that we've done stuff that you just can't see anywhere else. We did a Muscle Shoals tribute that was out of this world. That some of those people are dead now. We did a tribute to the Cannonball and Nat Adderley. Their families came. It was awesome. So, we try and pair authors and musicians. We did a program last year with the historian John Meacham and this guitar phenom named Yasmin Williams, that if you ever get a chance to hear her, go. And it was, they'd never met. They got together twice for about 10 minutes before the thing, and then it rocked. And I went up to them afterwards and said, yeah, I thought this would work. And so anyway, it's been a lot of fun.
Well, it's great to see a plan come together, and I think the appeal, which you alluded to, is the eclectic music selections. When you take a band like this year's headliner, the Flaming Lips, and pair that with a literary festival, that's not your normal event, and I think that is why part of the reason it's so successful, as well as it's easy to get to. Parking was a breeze last year. The logistics, nice walk into Cascades. It's perfect. And as long as the weather cooperates, knock on something.
Yeah, that's right.
It'll be outstanding. And I think you veered from the easy button, because if I've always had this vision, if I put out my own little book project, and if it for some reason skyrocketed to the bestseller list, I had this vision of pairing a book event with like acoustic music, Americana, bluegrass, something like that. And y'all could have said, hey, let's just do some, a little quiet festival, but you're bringing really interesting artists to the market. I don't think Flaming Lips have ever played Tallahassee, have they?
Yeah, apparently they played way back in the day at FSU, like in the '80s. There's a Club Down Under thing or something.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I mean, long ago. So they haven't been around, in the last, pretty good while.
So walk us through a talent selection search. I assume you have a board or a committee that takes care of those duties. I'm sure you're involved too. What does that look like?
Well, we do, and we take suggestions from everybody, from sponsors, from patrons at the festival. I keep a little list throughout the year of either groups and acts and authors that people suggest to me. And then I try and pay attention to things that I think will be sort of a unique fit here that we could do. So Flaming Lips was on our list. We kind of for the headliner, we sort of start the year with about 5 to 10, and they were one of the ones we were talking about, because I thought it was a nice fit for the festival. They're a little off the mainstream. They haven't been here in a long time. The show is if everybody who's ever been to one said, oh my God, this is one of the best live shows there is. So we're very excited about it. I think it'll end up being a sellout.
Yeah, they have a great following, an amazing catalog, and what a band. Have you ever looked at the Bacon Brothers?
We did, actually, a while ago. It's been, that I don't know, are they still touring or still doing stuff? We talked about it probably 5 or 6 years ago.
We looked at them for a client's event 2 years ago, and for their fee, they were more than willing to do a one-off performance, and it got really big budget to try to pull off in a hotel, so we went on to a comedian.
Okay, yeah. So this is Kevin Bacon and his brother, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I've got a pitch recently to do the Steep Canyon Rangers, and with the price it was quoted, I said, well, I'm assuming this is the Steve Martin less Steep Canyon. Well, yeah, Steve Martin, that's a whole other story. So okay, well, yeah, we'd still consider it. So, but we tried it musical. I've tried hard not to be pinpointed in a specific musical genre. There's a lot of people that want this to be the Americana festival of Americana music and books, and no. So we've had great gospel, we've had hip hop, we've had jazz and blues, and we'll do country, we'll do almost anything, just to try and mix it up a little bit.
Awesome. My idea for 2025 is the Darkness. I think they've reached a point in their career where they'd be a perfect American festival act. They've got their nice early hits to fall back on. What a fun band.
Okay.
Are you familiar with their work?
I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, English hard rock.
Okay.
Pretty loud, but reasonably loud. Well, let's go back in time. Where did you receive your education? Where are you from?
I'm from Tallahassee, so we moved here when I was 5, and I went to school all the way through here at what was in Timberlane, then Raw, then Leon. And then after high school, I was wanting to get out of town, and so I went to UF, and I went to undergrad and a law school there. Then I worked in Jacksonville for a few years, and then came back here, and I've been here ever since.
Well, go Gators.
Yeah.
I didn't put that commonality we had together until just now. It's a wonderful place to live and receive an education. And I'm headed back soon for the Orange and Blue game. We'll see if we can field a decent squad this year. Knock on something again.
It always seems to be a struggle, at least lately. But yeah, it's once you're there, you're there. I was an FSU fan until I went, and about 3 games into the first season, that switched over then.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. I grew up an Alabama fan, and once you get to wherever you're college campus is, assuming it has a program at the level of UF or some of our other conference members. It's awesome. So you got a law degree, and did you start out right out of the gate practicing law? Where'd your career take? What was your first stop?
Well, I worked for a small firm in Jacksonville. It's sort of amazing how just, sort of random things will change your whole life. So I had got to know a professor. I majored in finance in college, and I got to know a professor who was a finance professor there, and he had known my father long, long before when we lived in Gainesville. And so I was trying to decide where to go to law school, and he suggested, why don't you go talk to these friends of mine in Jacksonville? I said, okay. Well, it turned out to be people with a firm that does public finance work, which I never even knew what it was, never heard of it. And so I met with them, ended up going to UF for law school, but I sort of stayed in touch, and eventually I went to work for some people that broke off from that firm. And then I stayed, and I left those guys after 3 years, came back to Tallahassee, but still doing the same type of work, and I've done it ever since. So it's been a good career. Florida's, as you know, growing. There's a lot of need for public sector facilities, and we've done a lot of great things. Financed hospitals, schools, water and sewer systems. It's been a very rewarding run.
My first job to speak of was with LaFace Baggett, now Greenberg Traurig. A long time ago, so I have a special relationship with our legal community here, which a lot of them are our clients now for IT support at Aegis. But your career took some turns. You are a well-renowned author. Mm-hmm. How did you become an author? What was the motivating factor to say, I'm going to write a book?
Well, it was probably an early midlife crisis. I was in my 30s, actually, and I'd been a lawyer for 10 years there. And I was, because of our clients are spread around the state, so I spent a lot of time driving around the state. So, on the road by myself. And I'm thinking, well, been a lawyer for 10 years, got to be more than this. And so I thought about, I'm going to try and do several things. And so I said, I'd like to try and teach. I'd like to maybe run for office, and I'd like to try and write a book. And so eventually I did all three of those, and I taught for a couple of years at TCC as an adjunct professor, and that was enough to cure me of that. And then I ran in a fit of insanity.
What did you teach?
I taught a course on the Constitution, which was fine, but I was working full time. It took a little while to get out to TCC and back, and then all the grading happened over in one weekend of like 100 students, and so that was all. I just decided, maybe this it's not for me right now. And then in a fit of insanity, I ran for office and was elected, and so I did that for 10 years. But I started this book back right around that time when I was in my 30s, and I saw later somebody refer to this as the equivalent of waking up one day and saying, well, I think I'll go practice thoracic surgery today. And, because I had no idea what I was doing. And so I was very fortunate to get that book published. It was published by a regional press in Florida called Pineapple Press. And I look back on it now, and there are parts of it I go, well, this is pretty good. And then parts I'm kind of cringing at and going, but I discovered
I think anyone that's ever written anything can relate to that.
Well, and I discovered I liked doing it. I felt like I had some talent, and I remember I had a friend who had picked up that book. It was called The Return, and he came up to me and said, "Well, yeah, this was good." Like he expected it to be bad, but what a surprise! And so, and the topic of the book, I still think it's a great topic. It was about a black woman who claimed to be Christ returned. And there was this reporter that followed her around and tried to figure out was she or wasn't she. And so it was a very, just interesting setup and dynamic. And then I published, I had another book published in 2010 called The Gendarme that was, it was about the Armenian genocide, which my heritage way back is we think Armenian. And so that book got a lot of acclaim. It was published by a major publisher and got published in 10 languages and won some awards. And then I have another book that's going to be published next year in 2025 that is called Boy with Wings, and it's about a boy with wings. So I'm excited about that, and I'll hopefully I'll be at Word of South maybe in 2025. So we'll see.
That's great. So the book on the genocide, that was in, 1915, 1916? And it wasn't until recently that region admitted that these things happened, correct? Was your book before or after recent events?
Well, I don't know that they've admitted it to this day, at least the government there. So
And that's the former Ottoman Empire,
yes,
correct?
Yes.
So present-day Turkey,
yes.
for the most part?
Mm-hmm. And so the the events happened in 1914, 1915, and the number one response I got from people who read the book was, we had no idea this stuff ever happened. And what it was the Turks forced the Armenians out of the country, either killed them or took their property and forced them on these long treks through the desert to Syria. And hundreds of thousands of people died. And so I did a bunch of research on it. I read everything I could find. It was difficult reading. Some of this was just really, I have to put the book down, so I got to take a break from this. But and then I eventually went to Turkey and followed the paths that one of these caravans took into Syria, which you could go to at the time. And so I was very glad I did, because I had written the book by that point, but it hadn't been published. And there were a few things, as much research as I'd done, actually being there and seeing, this is a little bit different than the way I described it. So I got a chance to change that.
And it was the Christians that were persecuted, correct?
Well, the Armenians. So it was very similar. I mean, there was supposedly something that Hitler said. I'm not quite sure this is true, but he was reported to have said, "Well, who remembers the Armenians?" When he, 20, 30 years later, vis-a-vis the Jews and Germany. So it's very chilling stuff. And the setup of that book, which I think was part of the reason it got such acclaim, was it was told from the point of view of a Turkish guy who had been injured in the war and it lost a lot of his memory, and then late in life has a brain tumor and things start coming back, and he remembers stuff that happened. So anyway, like I say, I'm very very grateful to get it published. It's really hard to get a book published, as you know, and so I'm happy to get the new one published, and hopefully there'll be some more after that.
Awesome. So let's talk travel. What's the most interesting place that you visited in your life?
Well, I'm into travel, so I've been to 88 countries at this point, and I like and I'm willing to go places a lot of people aren't willing to go, and it's easier said for a man than a woman. There's a few less safety issues maybe at play, but I got a chance to go to Angel Falls in Venezuela back when you could go to Venezuela as an American, and it's a really spectacular place, and they. You come up this river to the base of the falls on these sort of motorized canoes, and then you can swim, at least you could at the time, in the base of the falls at Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world. So it was totally cool, and that was just I tell people, I mean, of the top 5 places I've been, that's definitely in the top 5 there.
How about favorite concert? We talked about one pre-production.
Yeah, that was
we talked about ZZ Top, ladies and gentlemen, as the bearded trio from Texas heads to Tallahassee this spring. One of my favorite bands is I'm from Houston originally, and they would end their tours in Houston, Texas, and our whole family would go out, and it was a to-do. And the crowds were a little rowdy, but remotely civil. How about your fave?
Well, ZZ Top was, as I mentioned, was my first concert I ever went to in Doak Campbell Stadium. But I don't know if it was my absolute favorite, but it was sort of a game changer. I saw the Police for free on Lake Alice Field in Gainesville, and I had no idea who they were. I mean, this was absolutely first they're coming out. And it was Roxanne had just come out, and it was like, wow, this is something different here. And so that was, that's just, one of the most memorable ones I've ever been to. One other one that I saw, just a few yards from here at the Moon, Hall & Oates had a tour, and they had like a pre-show at the Moon,
Nice.
on their way to, and this is probably 1995 or somewhere along there. And so, the Moon was relatively, a few hundred people there, and we're standing, to the stage from me to you, and my wife's passing John Oates a note. I mean, it was all, it was all pretty wild. So that was another memorable one.
Awesome. Yeah, we've had some great shows in our region. I think my first show was Neil Diamond. It's probably on the top 20 favorites too. That might have been, it might have been the Jazz Singer tour also, because that would check with the time. Thanks, Mom, for taking me to Neil Diamond at the Omni in Atlanta. And kudos to Dad. He took me to see Iron Maiden in the 80s. You want to talk about a loud show. He bowed out about halfway through and stood next to the beer vendor for the remainder of the show. So going out into left field, if you could time travel, where would you head to?
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. I always thought that, as an author, that there are periods when authors really seem to be in the forefront of culture more so than now. And
That's
so
'cause everybody's an author now, so
yeah,
they think.
well, exactly. But so I back when like the Impressionist painters were in Paris, and the authors and that sort of stuff. I think that would have been a really cool time to be alive, to just see what things were like, the discussion of ideas, of books and art. Maybe the reality wouldn't have been that great, but it's very intriguing to me.
100%. Most recent film you've seen?
Oh, I watched this movie the other night that somebody mentioned to me, this is similar in a way to your book that's going to be published, the Boy with Wings book. So I watched this movie, Powder. Did you ever see that movie?
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, and it was
It had a skin issue.
Yeah, it was similar in a way. Not fortunately not too similar, but it was. I was glad somebody mentioned it to me, because I'd never heard of it. And it came out in '95. I think I was in the middle of young children at that stage of my life, so I missed that. But yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
Awesome. So as an author, and congratulations on the successes you've had with your literary work, what do you like to read?
Oh, I try and read a lot. It's when people ask me, well, I want to be a writer, what should I do? It's like read a lot and read good stuff. So I, probably like a lot of people, I read a lot of stuff that's pretty good. Rarely do I read something that's just out of this world excellent. But I've read a couple recently that are just super, and they're by really good authors. There's a book called Wellness by a guy named Patrick Nix. I think his first name is Patrick. Anyway, it's outstanding. And then a book by Zadie Smith called The Fraud, which is also outstanding. So that's, so I try and I have a goal to read or listen to the audio tapes for 40 books a year. Generally we'll get there. And again, most of it's pretty good. Some I don't like, and boy, 5 or 6 are just outstanding.
Yeah, I was asked from an audience member. I was giving a little chat to the Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce last week, and so, well, what book should I read for business success? And I blanked. And then in hindsight, Walter Isaacson, I think, was his name, wrote a nice Steve Jobs story. I never really got into the Steve Jobs bandwagon,
Right.
But I can see why people do after reading that book. Just totally driven. I mean, to the point of being irritating and, temper tantrum-esque. But what a wonderful read. And the film was actually decent.
I saw the film. He was Armenian, but his parents were, I think he was raised by step-parents or something. There was some disconnect there. So, but yeah, the film was, and what an intense guy. I mean, it was pretty interesting.
But the answer I gave to the audience, my 7 to 7 work schedule that goes 7 days a week, because I'm always thinking about something. It could be this show, it could be the next column or the next technical crisis, whatever that is, and most of which I love, all of the above. But, I try to read fiction to get away from the technology and the business messages, to try to have a break, at least let my mind rest. And so I'm reading a private investigator series called the Dresden Files, and the private investigator also happens to be a wizard. So
Okay.
it's out there. It's great.
Who's the author? Do you
Jim
remember?
Butcher. He's
Okay.
been writing for about 20 years, I would guess. And he wrote the first Dresden Files book as a project for school, and the teacher pushed him, you should take this further. And he listened, and he did. And for fans of science fiction or fantasy, whatever you want to call it, you know, he's a legend, and a great series. I think it's still in action, so there's a new one coming out soon. And that said, we talked about some amazing points in your career. In your opinion, what's that proudest moment look like?
Well, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to have had, different careers. So I have a legal career that's is sort of winding to an end now. I've been a lawyer for almost 40 years, and so so that's been a long road. I've been with the same law firm for 37 years, which is very unusual. But
It's a heck of a run.
Yeah, I enjoy the people I work with. I'm the president of the firm at this point. And like I say, we've done a lot of good things for Florida. I'm very proud of the firm and what we've done. As an author, I've defied very long odds several times. I've been able to get an agent when it's very, very difficult to do that. And I've been able to get books published by major publishers, which is very, very difficult to do. So that's, and if you're, your books are sort of like your children. What books do you like the best? Well, I spent years of my life on each of them, so I'm very partial to all of them. But I'm grateful to have had that success. And then the festival, I'm super proud of. I mean, it is like a whole additional job for me, and I thought when we started this, I was thinking, well, I'll probably do this 5 years or so and bail on out. Somebody else can take this over. But 10 years in, I'm still there. And I've discovered that I enjoy it. I like the creative part of trying to put this together and make it work. And it, one of the best things about it personally is that it has exposed me to music that otherwise I would have never been exposed to, and just fantastic stuff. So I'll be 65 in a couple of weeks. I hope I can keep going for a while and keep doing that.
Happy almost birthday.
Yeah.
And walk our crowd through today. What is Word of South like? It starts, on a Thursday? Is that right?
No, it starts on a Friday. So Friday night, and this will be April 26th this year, is a ticketed show, which is the Flaming Lips.
Okay.
And you can get
so you
tickets.
Off coming fast out of the gate with,
Yeah,
with the big artists.
And there's tickets. The amphitheater holds there's about 1,500 seats, and about 1,500 people can fit in the grass, and it's selling well. So I think it is going to sell out by the time. So get your tickets now if you don't have them. And then the rest of the weekend is free, and so we have 50-something acts on 8 different stages. Some is outside under tents, some is indoors in the ballroom at the Marriott AC Hotel, and in the Parkview room up by that. We have a new stage that we inaugurated last year that's on the plaza there, that's connected to the Marriott AC, which works super well. I think that there's going to be great acts there this year. And then we're doing a few things over at Amicus Brewery, which just opened this year.
Nice.
And we'll have, I think, 2 events Saturday and 2 Sunday that we're going to hold over there. So it should be a great weekend, even if it rains, and it has rained at Word of South. The very first year it rained all weekend. But we've sort of developed I think a pretty good plan of what to do. We try not to cancel anything. We move things to the Moon, or to this year it would be to Young Actors, to Goodwood, and the show goes on. And for some people that I can sit here at the Moon and have a cold beverage and watch bands all afternoon. Yeah, that works.
Perfect.
So I think no matter what, I think it's going to be a great festival.
Well, we look forward to it. As a company, we're all going out to see the Flaming Lips. I had a wonderful introduction to that band. When I worked in the music business as an artist manager, they had a big hit. It was, mainstream rock, Vaseline. So I associated them with that hit, and that's it's a disservice to them, because their other works are much stronger than that song. So I got a phone call from Bradley Beasley, who's a filmmaker who grew up with Wayne, the lead singer of the band, and he had made a video about the band called Fearless Freaks. And it's a great documentary film, goes into their origin and some of their successes. But I had written a column about the island of Bimini and some overdevelopment that had gone on the island. I have a friend with some property there, so I visited a few times. And anyway, Bradley invited me to take part in a film he was making about the island. So I got to hear all his behind-the-scenes Flaming Lips stories, and I picked up just a love for the band's music. And I can't wait to see them, as this will be my first live show.
Well, it's interesting. I really didn't have a lot of exposure to the Flaming Lips before we had this conversation, or before we invited them to come to Word of South. And apparently they are doing, I don't know if this is all they're doing, but they are replaying the Yoshimi and the Pink Robots album at this concert. And so I bought it. I've never really heard this. And
Yoshimi likes karate.
Yeah, I mean, Yoshimi, this is all pretty wild, and it wasn't what I thought it would be. I mean, it's very kind of dream poppy, and it's just really good. So I think people, if you're familiar, I've had people come up to me and said, "Oh, I love that album." So well, you're going to hear it, because that's a lot of what they're doing at the concert. And
in a very weird life type thing, I hear their music everywhere. I was watching Guardians of the Galaxy 3 just the other Sunday. It was raining, and then one of their songs just starts blasting in the film, and it reminds me of the book Rabbits. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Terry Miles wrote it. He's a filmmaker and author and podcast host, but just an amazing read. So that is our show today. Mark, any closing thoughts?
Nah, thanks so much, Blake, for allowing me to be on. I hope folks that are hearing this, come out to Word of South. If you've never been, come check it out. It's free on Saturday and Sunday. Wander around, listen to bands. There's all sorts of music, all sorts of authors, a lot of vendors selling stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Check out Word of South. Check out Mark's books, and look out for hackers. That is my cyber alert as we close today. Thanks again, Mark, for coming on the show. That is the Biz and Tech Podcast, Season 6 in full swing. We'll see you again in a month. Have an awesome day.